Hello everyone, in this video we're going to be going over two scenarios on how I believe the bull market can end. Now we have already discussed and called for not only the bull market since the lows, but we are actually relatively within the confines of the lower spectrum of the conclusion stage when looking at it from a macro perspective. So of course this can take time, but this is just more of an approach on how we can start preparing for the next possible bear market, and also discuss how to risk manage our positions with all of the enthusiasm coming into the markets as we speak. I am here as a neutral bystander since the market is a zero-sum game after all. And with all of that mindset taken into consideration, if we take a look at this scenario, or the first scenario rather, this shows us how Bitcoin has behaved from a cyclical standpoint, meaning that Bitcoin has always behaved relatively the same from a cycle standpoint in easy terminology. Now, past price action is not indicative of future price action, but it can definitely rhyme. And the way I have designed this chart is by using the halving standpoints and in combination with the Elliott Wave Theory. You can see that we are inching closer to what could be finally going into the bear market of a higher degree, which is the narrative that I have been sharing for quite some time. Now, if we take a look at what we have been talking about since 2022, that is exactly the opposite of what was happening now. I've been talking about a bull market to happen, and we're still in that current stage right now since $15,000 to the $20,000 range. This is all on record, by the way, on my trading view. Since 2022 that I've been talking about, we've been looking for possibly 5 waves up for how this wave could be completing, and that is why we're kind of going here now. You can see we're in that conclusion stage for this higher degree wave 5. Now the counts have changed ever since, and I've kind of tidied up things, and you can see the idea still remains the same because the hybrid price action of 5 waves going to higher degree wave 1 or wave 5 is still the same. We're going to be looking for a larger pullback regardless. Now, like I've said, past price action is not indicative of future price action, but it can definitely rhyme. And how that's going to be rhyming is based on the idea that this bull market is going to end or conclude in 5 waves. And that's exactly what we have been talking about for the past few months. So you can see Bitcoin has comically, and it's quite amusing how Bitcoin has behaved so well, considering how, you know, since its inception date, working in 5s and 3s so well that this is how we're going to be expecting the next kind of possible move, where we're going to be looking for another 3-way pullback. It's worked so perfectly well. And if we're going to use that same kind of basis standpoint that we're looking for 5 waves up, again, we're looking for 5 waves up in this degree here of the minor degree in white, it's now looking like it's starting to conclude as we are now in the lower spectrum of that box that I've been mentioning, as we just breached all-time highs. So that is how we're seeing it on this idea. Now, there are a lot of pros and cons to this idea. No, idea or cycle theory is going to work perfectly, but this is just how I see it and has worked very well for me. As you can see, back in 2022, we've been calling for that idea where we're going to look for a major move to the upside when everyone was calling for $0 per Bitcoin. We've been calling rather the opposite, but now it's about the transitional stage. It's not the set in stone of where it's going to happen. That's not my concern on where that 5th wave is going to end. It's about how we're going to be transitioning and looking for the clues on how that's going to be happening. We're going to be looking for the distribution of this final wave before we go into that bear market. So again, Bitcoin has kind of evaded all of the FUD and the uncertainty happening in the markets throughout the years. China banning crypto, the Silk Road issue, Mt. Gox hacks twice, and the payout issue that's currently still going on, the introduction of major regulations since 2017 to 2018, the collapse of FTX, major fallout of FTX was a huge kind of continuation for that bear market that we had from the past bear market, and the collapse of Luna. All of these, Bitcoin was on schedule. That's the most important thing. And this idea is based on that fractal alone, where we're going to be working for this 1, 2, and then finally go into that last final expansion phase. Now, another kind of observation that I've been able to get out of this is that with each previous bear market, we've usually seen around an 80 to a 90% pullback, but this previous bear market was around only 76%, which is kind of an interesting observation. It's showing us that with each pullback and with each pump, they're getting a lot tighter, meaning that with each move to the upside and pullback, these pullbacks are not going to be as deep. So the next bear market, if we're considering that this next bear market is going to be taking into consideration for how the previous bear market played out, could be around a 60 to 70% pullback as well, not as deep as the previous first last 3 bear markets that has happened. So that is giving us an idea that even with this fractal nature in mind, we may be entering the expansion phase of the 345s, 345s, and 345s, as this is a nested structure if we're looking at it from a 1-2, 1-2, 1-2 perspective. So that's kind of how we're going to be observing the next few months and weeks approaching how this fifth wave is going to be ending. I'm still looking for a possible pullback, but there is another scenario that I was able to draw out, which is taking into consideration that the markets are finally ready to go into the maturity phase. Now, this is based on the idea that the medium time frame is still going to stick around this range for quite some time before a major blow off top. And this perspective is grounded more in the market psychology, based on the notion that markets are now more sophisticated, aka smarter, than previously assumed. While there is an inflow of dumb money coming in with each cycle, that's very important, dumb money, quote unquote, it's likely that many of these investors have already been burned, and a lot of people are skeptical of re-entering the markets even though Bitcoin is creating these new highs. And currently, as price increases, it seems to be driven by institution and recycled capital from previous or perpetual futures traders rather than a significant influx of new uninformed investors. I think at this point, arguably, everyone knows what a Bitcoin is, and usually it's categorized into 2 groups. I've been burned so much by Bitcoin, and I don't want to be taking into participation of the next bull market, regardless of how much it goes up. Or there's a second group of people where it's the recycled capital, where a lot of people have been burned, but they also want to get back in, or the people who have been just hodling basically ever since its inception or with each cycle bottom. So there's not enough new money coming into the markets, and this idea kind of portrays that idea. So with that being into consideration, that diagonal idea does a perfect job of kind of portraying the observation and the psychology of how that can happen within the next few years. So with that being said, this final move here, going to that diagonal, we already have that 1, 2, 3, 4 established, and we may just be working in that final fifth wave where we are going to be seeing higher levels, but everything in between, it gets far tighter, and this is going to be creating a contracting wedge shape, and that is the ending diagonal of this fifth wave that we're looking for. So with that being said, this ending diagonal is going to be behaved as 3 waves in between with each of these moves here. And as you can see, we have 3 waves going into subwave 1, we have a 3 wave here into a wave 2, 3 wave that's going to be assumed for this wave 3, 3 wave, 3 wave, and that's how we're going to be ending this entire bull market. So we will have such a huge fluctuation in price action before we actually get the major blow off top. Instead of working on that major cyclical fractal where we have a 1-2 pullback and then we just continue up for that major move to the upside of that expansion phase. So as you can see, this alternative approach to Bitcoin cycle, you can see that this idea also is pretty much arguably, and I would say I did a pretty good job of making sure to convince people that this is also possible, because a lot of people, a lot of the dumb money, there just may not be real dumb money coming into the markets. Now, that's of course going to be all based on perception and how you see the current market cycle, but this can take into form, meaning that this whole move here is all corrective, meaning that this is all working in 3-wave fashions, and that's going to be eventually that blow off top that we're going to be looking for, reset the markets as necessary. And what's another comically funny and amusing is that even if we do get a major blow off top and come back down to the $10,000 range with this assumed cycle wave 2, is that it's still bullish. That's just the major thing. It's still bullish no matter what, even if we come back down to these levels. But this just calls for a major reset and kind of making sure Bitcoin comes back to a cheaper level where people really want to buy it. Now, again, Bitcoin and the markets is a zero-sum game after all. So who knows? This could happen. And with this idea in mind, with the diagonal idea in mind and how these retracements occur, it's all coming into play as well for this idea, meaning that if we're going to get that first initial retracement, usually you'll see the first initial retracement kind of retracing the entire diagonal in itself. So that guideline is also in play. We're going to have a bear market rally. This will be the major rally. And then we'll have another continuation for part 2 of that bear market, of that major move from, around this level to down to the $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 range again to retest this major demand level as well. So that is how I'm seeing these two scenarios possibly playing out. I'm not saying which is going to be playing out. However, again, this idea has been working out so comically well. It's quite amusing how Bitcoin has been behaving from a cyclical standpoint and how behavior psychology is all intertwining. But if we're going to take that into consideration, I am still looking for this 5-way move up to conclude and also go for a 3-way pullback, which should be around 60 to an 80%. We don't know how much of a pullback it will be, but since we are in that higher degree of a wave 1 of this orange, we're looking for a pullback nevertheless. So that's how I'm currently seeing it, ladies and gentlemen. Also, again, please make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It does help the channel, and I will make sure to have a shorter time frame update for you guys, especially now that we're reaching around the $90,000 levels. Everything is coming into fruition perfectly, and right now it's just more of how can we secure our profits more than about how far Bitcoin is going to be going. Thank you very much. I'll see you guys in the next video. Have a fantastic rest of the week. Bye-bye.